Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. So glad you guys are tuning in to CC Live today. You say, you see, Toy Story made me scared of toys. Yeah, I'm willing to admit it. Toy Story scared me as a little kid. I mean, think about it for a second. Your toys coming alive when you aren't there is a wild thought. And as a little kid, all I can think about was my toys trying to link me up to the bed or torture me in some kind of way. I mean, think about it. Think about Sid. That dude was absolutely terrifying. You see, toys coming back alive in a crazy way means only the worst for me. I mean, at least that's what my 5-year-old self thought. And obviously, once I got older, I realized the toys moving doesn't just happen. It's all just a movie. Spoiler alert. But truthfully, I love Toy Story and the movie, and no one can tell me different, but Toy Story 2 and 3 proves that sequels could be better than the original. I love Toy Story, though, because you have this group of characters going through these crazy adventures. But in the end, it always ends in a way that the story continues. They find a new home. They're saved from their inevitable doom. The Claw. Well, maybe not the Claw, but you see, this last part of the Bible has this kind of storyline. There's no Claw necessarily, but there is a guy named Paul. So today I want us to focus on the letters of the New Testament. And I want to see how those letters help shape the church and us today. To this point, let's recap where we've been. First thing we covered was translations. The Bible has been translated countless times, and in that, produce certain texts and translations of the Bible, simply put at 3 letters typically. And finding the best translation for you is super important, and finding the right translation that you understand and have researched is super important. Weeks 2 and 3, we dove into the Old Testament. You see, the Jews, they break down the Old Testament in 3 different parts called the Tanakh. The first part is the Torah, and that's the first 5 books of the Bible. The second part being the Nevi'im, and that's the prophets. The final part being the Ketuvim, which is the final collection of all of the Old Testament books that remain, different poetry aspects. Last week, we dove into the first part of the New Testament, which is the Gospels. You see, Jesus had arrived on the scene being the new king that God promised to us. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John each tell the story of Jesus, and we have to read those. So today I want to cover the letters, the rest of the Bible. You see, the letters are written by several different authors with one main author a part of it. We first get introduced to that author in Acts. This guy named Paul is Saul, and he's persecuting the church. And you can actually find Saul killing Christians and not wanting the church to grow. Meanwhile, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the disciples, the apostles, specifically Peter, looking to start and rapidly grow the church. And we have this interaction in Acts where Paul has an encounter with God. And because of it, he goes blind. And Ananias, one of God's followers, one of God's many followers, is commanded to go restore his vision. And Acts begins the outline for us to be able to see what we should do as the church. Acts is the description for what the church should be, and almost like an origin story of it. From there, we see letters being sent to all sorts of followers of Jesus to be corrections, encouragement, and instructions for how to follow Jesus. See, these letters are just what we think. They're letters literally written out on parchment to be read. The difference, though, they weren't meant to be read, just written and that would be it. They weren't meant to be read one-on-one. These letters were written to be read aloud. They would be heard by the entire community and followers, and there would be those followers that would take note on the specific words being said. You see, they didn't have Google back then. They had to listen to these things. You see, sometimes the letters were made to be challenges to the believers. Sometimes they were made to be a piece of accountability, maybe encouragement. But each city brought a different culture, and with that, a different thing to focus on. The letters have this kind of vagueness about them if you were just to read them over word by word, though. So it's very important to understand exactly why these letters were written, who wrote them, and why they were sent then. You see, these letters, they were written by the apostles for the people of that city, but they can also be lessons for us to see as well. One of my favorite verses of the New Testament can be found in Philippians, and I love this concept of light in God. Light in us. Let's read it. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. Even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me. Philippians is one of the most encouraging books of the New Testament, but you can find all sorts of topics throughout. You can find verses on love in 1 Corinthians. You can find how the leaders in the church should be in 1 and 2 Timothy, and how to tame your tongue in James. You see, each book provides its own lessons and insights and themes on following Jesus. And the key of these letters, the story doesn't end with Jesus. Jesus had thousands of followers in his lifetime, and even then, he didn't want the story to end with them. The story had to continue to us today. As we read the Bible, the story doesn't stop thousands of years ago in a book called Revelation. Today, we find ourselves following Jesus. Thousands of years after a chapter in the book has been written, we are living out our lives for Christ. How do we exemplify Christ best? How do we show his love? How do we care for others? How do we honor our father and mother? You see, we look to the best example in the Bible. And the Bible is full of stories to learn and understand. We just have to be willing to crack open the book. And so this week, as you dive in, remember, how can you understand the Bible more as you navigate it? Here's the deal. We have scriptures that we're posting, and we have our last set of scriptures for the letters coming this week on our Instagram at _cc.students. And there you can understand more of the stories and how to navigate and understand the context a little better. Remember, ask questions like, where are the writers writing to? What's happening in this letter? What's the overall theme the writer wanted to look? Use Google as a resource. It's those type of things that will help you be Jesus this week. See you guys soon.